What happens when a strict HOA president tries to evict the wrong neighbor, only to find out the woman she's targeting owns not just her home, but part of her yard too? You could almost hear the sound of Patricia Kincaid's heels snapping against the concrete before you even saw her. That's how she made an entrance in her neighborhood. A force of control, never subtle, always sharp. That morning in Columbus, Ohio, the street was alive with something unusual. A moving truck parked in front of the old brick colonial at the corner of Willow Lane. Patricia didn't like unusual. She liked predictability. And what she saw through her sunglasses convinced her that her neighborhood was about to change in a way she didn't approve of. The truck door slid open with a clang, and a woman stepped down, balancing a medium-sized box against her hip. She was tall, her posture steady, her expression focused on the task in front of her. Selena Ward. Patricia didn't know her name yet, but in her mind it didn't matter. She had already labeled her. "Renters," Patricia muttered under her breath, lips tight. She crossed her arms as if folding them could shield the street from what she believed was an intrusion. Selena set the box on the porch, brushed the hair from her face, and turned back toward the truck. She didn't even notice Patricia at first, standing like a sentry at the edge of her driveway. But Patricia had no patience for being ignored. "Excuse me." Patricia's voice carried sharply across the street. Selena looked over, caught off guard. "Morning," she said politely, with a small smile. Patricia didn't return the smile. "Are you aware of the HOA guidelines here?" Selena blinked, confused for a moment. "Guidelines?" "Yes, rules about occupancy, property standards, and other matters," Patricia said, her words cutting in a way that suggested she was used to lecturing. Selena tilted her head slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I just moved in." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Moved in? As in, you're renting this property?" Selena paused, reading the tone, recognizing the assumption hanging in the air. She chose her words carefully. "I live here now, yes." That answer didn't satisfy Patricia. She stepped closer, heels clicking louder now as if they carried authority of their own. "Renters aren't permitted on Willow Lane. It's in the bylaws. This is a community of homeowners." Selena's patience thinned just slightly. "I don't see how that's your concern." "I'm unpacking. If you'll excuse me." But Patricia wasn't done. "It is my concern. I'm the president of the HOA. It's my responsibility to maintain the integrity of this neighborhood. People here take pride in ownership." Selena took a quiet breath and forced a calm smile. "That's good to hear." She lifted another box, refusing to give Patricia the confrontation she seemed to be craving. From across the street, blinds shifted. Neighbors were watching. Patricia thrived on that. The audience, the performance. "You can't just move in without proper documentation." Patricia pressed. "I'll need to see a copy of the lease at the very least." Selena set the box down slowly, her patience cracking. "Lease?" she repeated, her tone steady but sharper now. "Yes, don't act like you don't know," Patricia said, her voice dripping with accusation. "The owners here don't just sell to anyone, and they certainly don't allow their properties to be used for temporary rentals." Selena studied her for a long moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. She had dealt with people like this before, the assumptions, the certainty, the arrogance wrapped as authority. Still, she chose not to fight her right then. "Not yet. I think you'll find," Selena said carefully, "that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Patricia raised her eyebrows, scoffing under her breath as she turned away. "We'll see about that," she muttered, loud enough for Selena to hear. As the moving truck rumbled and boxes piled onto the porch, the neighborhood stood at attention, some pretending not to watch, others whispering behind curtains. And while Selena focused on moving her belongings inside, Patricia was already plotting her next move. But what Patricia didn't realize was that her first step in this battle had only set the stage for a much bigger humiliation. By the next morning, the air on Willow Lane felt heavier, though nothing had changed except for one thing: a piece of paper taped to Selena Ward's freshly painted front door. Patricia Kincaid had made her move. The bold print at the top read, Notice of HOA violation, and beneath it, in Patricia's precise handwriting, were a series of demands. Remove moving boxes from the porch, present proof of residency, and provide documentation of ownership or tenancy within 72 hours. Selina found it when she stepped outside with a mug of coffee in her hand. She paused, tilted her head, and read it twice, trying to decide if she should laugh or feel insulted. She had closed on the property just days ago, wired the funds herself, and yet here she was, being treated like a trespasser on her own front step. She peeled the paper off slowly and folded it in half. "So this is how we're doing things," she murmured to herself. The sound of a throat clearing made her glance up. Patricia stood at the edge of her driveway again, arms crossed, as if she had been waiting for this very moment. "Good morning," Patricia said, though the words carried no warmth. "Morning," Selina replied, sipping her coffee, steady as ever. "I see you've received the notice," Patricia continued, nodding toward the folded paper in Selina's hand. "Yes," Selina said simply. "I read it." "And?" Patricia pressed, as if expecting obedience. Selina shrugged. "And I don't see how this applies to me." Patricia's eyes flashed. "It applies to everyone who lives here. If you're renting, that's a violation. If you're improperly storing items on the porch, that's a violation. The HOA has rules for a reason." Selina lowered her mug, her patience wearing thin. "Let's clear something up. I'm not renting. And those boxes? I'm moving in." It's called life. From across the street, a man watering his lawn slowed his movements, listening closely. Curtains twitched again. People were watching, soaking in every word. Patricia took a step forward, her voice rising just enough for the neighborhood to hear. "Then provide documentation? If you're truly the owner, that shouldn't be difficult. Otherwise, you'll be fined." Selina set her coffee on the porch rail and straightened her posture. "Fined? For living in my own house?" Patricia didn't blink. "Correct." There was a pause, heavy and tense. Selina looked her straight in the eye, then broke into a small laugh. "You know, I closed on this house less than a week ago. Cash, signed deed, title transfer, the works. And here you are, trying to slap fines on me like I snuck in under the cover of night." That laugh unsettled Patricia more than shouting would have. It was calm, confident, and it carried weight. "Until I see proof, this property is under review," Patricia said firmly, her jaw set. "You may think you can talk circles around me, but I know my job." Selina's response was measured, almost deliberate. "And I know mine. Which right now is getting my belongings into my home, not defending myself from someone who doesn't even know my name." That last part stung Patricia. She hated being called out, especially in front of others. The man across the street shifted uncomfortably and turned off his hose, retreating inside. But his silence said enough. People were listening. People were noticing. Selina picked up her coffee again and gave Patricia a steady look. "You want proof? Fine. I'll show you proof. But when I do, I expect an apology." Patricia scoffed. "Don't hold your breath." Selina's tone dropped to something firmer. "Oh, I won't. Because unlike you, I don't go around making assumptions about strangers." Patricia froze for a moment, her grip tightening on the clipboard she carried. She wanted to fire back, but for once, words failed her. So she turned on her heel, retreating toward her driveway with her pride wounded, but her determination intact. As she walked away, Selina shook her head and muttered under her breath, "Some people really don't know when to quit." She tucked the notice inside and closed the door, leaving Patricia fuming on the sidewalk. Later that afternoon, as movers carried in the last of Selina's furniture, Patricia returned with another copy of the violation notice, this time slipping it under the door. The persistence was almost laughable, but Selina decided to wait. She knew the deed in her hands was stronger than any piece of paper Patricia could tape to her door. But what Patricia didn't know was that her threats were about to backfire spectacularly, and the neighborhood she thought she controlled was already questioning where her authority really ended. By the third day, the tension on Willow Lane could have been cut with a knife. What had started as a single notice had turned into a campaign. Patricia Kincaid wasn't content to simply tape papers to a door. She wanted a show of force. That morning, Selina Ward stepped outside to find not one, but 3 brightly printed notices fluttering in the wind on her porch railing. One was about trash cans being visible from the street. Another accused her of failing to register with the HOA office. And the last, Patricia's boldest move, warned of immediate legal action if proof of residency wasn't produced within 48 hours. Selina stared at the stack, shaking her head slowly. It was absurd, almost comical. But the comedy didn't mask the sting of being singled out. She knew it wasn't about trash cans or paperwork. It was about Patricia's need to dominate, to remind everyone that she was the gatekeeper of this neighborhood. As Selina gathered the notices, she heard Patricia's voice cut through the morning air. "You can keep pulling them down," Patricia called from across the street. "But they'll keep coming back until you comply." Selina exhaled deeply, walked to the edge of her lawn, and held up the stack. "You want to talk about this? Then let's actually talk." Patricia didn't hesitate. She crossed over, clipboard tucked under her arm, her stride sharp and commanding. Neighbors appeared almost instantly, as though the drama had become their morning entertainment. Curtains opened, dogs were shushed, and someone even lingered by their mailbox a little too long. "You're refusing to cooperate," Patricia announced, stopping a few feet away. "I'm refusing to be harassed," Selina countered. "This isn't harassment. This is enforcement." Selina let out a humorless laugh. "Enforcement? For boxes on a porch and trash cans not tucked at a perfect angle? Come on, this isn't about rules. This is about you not wanting me here." The words hung heavy, daring Patricia to deny them. But Patricia, never one to back down, leaned forward. "If you really owned this house, you would have nothing to hide, but everything about you screams tenant, and tenants lower property values." A ripple of discomfort spread among the small crowd of neighbors. Some shifted uneasily, while others pretended to be preoccupied. But everyone heard the undertone in Patricia's words. Selina folded the notices neatly, her movements controlled. "You're overstepping. I don't owe you explanations. Not here, not on my lawn. If you have questions about ownership, check the county records." Patricia's lips tightened. "I don't need county records. I need proof from you." "Then you're going to be waiting a long time," Selina replied firmly. "Because I don't answer to you." Patricia's voice rose, her tone sharp enough to cut. "This is my neighborhood. I've kept it in order for over a decade. People respect me because I make sure things are done right. If you think you can waltz in here and ignore the system, you're mistaken." Selina locked eyes with her. "Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn," the crowd murmured faintly at that line. Patricia flushed, realizing that Selina's words had struck deeper than she intended. She turned to the onlookers, gesturing with her clipboard. "You all know what happens when rules are ignored. One person pushes the boundaries, and suddenly the whole community suffers. Is that what we want?" A few heads nodded out of habit, but most people stayed silent. Patricia's grip on her audience wasn't as strong as it once had been. Selina stepped closer, her voice calm but commanding. "I bought this house because I wanted peace. A place where I could build a future without interference. But instead, I've had to waste my time explaining myself to someone who doesn't even have the authority she claims." Patricia flinched, her jaw clenching. "You'll regret talking to me like that." Selina's response was measured, but each word carried weight. "No, Patricia. The only regret here is that you've mistaken intimidation for leadership." The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match. Neighbors looked at one another, some nodding subtly in Selina's direction. Patricia's dominance was cracking, and she knew it. She turned abruptly, storming back across the street with her clipboard hugged tightly to her chest. But her words trailed behind her, sharp and desperate. "This isn't over." Not by a long shot, Selina watched her go, the stack of notices still in her hand. She knew Patricia wouldn't stop. People like her never did. But what Patricia didn't realize was that every confrontation was weakening her grip, not strengthening it. But Patricia was about to make her boldest move yet, one that would drag the entire neighborhood into the conflict and force Selina to reveal the truth sooner than she had planned. 2 days later, Patricia Kincaid decided to escalate things beyond notices and public arguments. She called for a compliance check, an unscheduled walkthrough she claimed was authorized by the HOA bylaws. The problem was, she had no such authority. Still, that didn't stop her from marching up Selina Ward's driveway one humid afternoon with her clipboard in one hand and a camera phone in the other. Selina was kneeling by a row of flower pots, adjusting soil levels, when she heard the crunch of heels on gravel. She looked up, immediately recognizing the determined stride. "You're trespassing," Selina said calmly, brushing dirt from her gloves. "I'm documenting," Patricia replied without hesitation. "Failure to comply leaves me no choice but to escalate." She raised her phone and began snapping pictures of the porch, the lawn, even the cracks in the sidewalk. Selina stood, straightening her back. "Document all you want, but if you don't leave, I'll call the police." Patricia lowered her phone just enough to smirk. "Go ahead. I'll explain to them you're refusing to show proof of ownership. Then we'll see who they side with." The exchange had drawn a small audience again. Children paused on bicycles, neighbors slowed their evening walks, and even the mail carrier lingered a moment longer than usual. Everyone sensed the tension boiling over. Selina inhaled deeply, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a folded document she had been carrying for days, just in case. She held it up with deliberate patience. "You want proof?" she said, her voice steady but firm. "Here it is." Patricia's smirk faltered. Selina unfolded the paper, revealing an official deed stamped and signed by the Franklin County Recorder's Office. The bold lettering across the top confirmed it. "Selina Marie Ward, owner of record." Gasps echoed from the small crowd. Even the mail carrier froze mid-step. Patricia blinked, her mouth opening slightly before she quickly shut it again. "This house belongs to me," Selina continued, holding the document higher so everyone nearby could see. "I purchased it outright. No lease, no landlord, no temporary anything. I'm the homeowner." Patricia's face flushed crimson, but she tried to recover. "Anyone could print something like that," she scoffed weakly. Selina raised an eyebrow. "You think the county recorder's seal is something you can print at home? Why don't you check the public records? They're open to anyone. You'll find my name there." The mail carrier, emboldened by curiosity, nodded. "She's right. You can check that online in minutes." Patricia shot him a glare, then turned back to Selina. "Even if you are the owner, that doesn't excuse non-compliance with the HOA's rules. Ownership doesn't give you the right to disregard standards." Selina folded the deed neatly, tucking it back into her pocket. "And it doesn't give you the right to harass neighbors you don't approve of. You've gone out of your way to target me from day one. Why? Because you assumed I didn't belong here." The words struck hard. Neighbors glanced at one another, whispers forming at the edges of the crowd. Patricia cleared her throat, forcing composure. "This isn't about who belongs. This is about keeping order." "No," Selina replied, her voice sharper now. "This is about you being wrong and too proud to admit it." For once, Patricia didn't have a comeback. Her clipboard wavered in her hands, and her eyes darted toward the growing crowd. She hated being cornered, hated being challenged in front of the very people she thought she ruled. Selina softened her tone, but kept her stance firm. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. I moved here because I wanted peace. The same thing everyone else wants. But peace doesn't exist when one person thinks they're the law. That's not community. That's control." The crowd murmured in agreement. Patricia's authority was slipping, and she knew it. "I'll review the situation," Patricia muttered, her voice trembling with anger she couldn't disguise. She turned quickly, retreating toward her home. The once commanding click of her heels now sounded uneven, rushed. Selina watched her go, exhaling slowly. The neighbors' eyes lingered on her a moment longer, then began to scatter. Some offered small smiles, others nods of silent support. Selina gave a brief wave before heading back to her flower pots, her heart pounding but her resolve intact. But while Patricia had been embarrassed, she wasn't finished. In her mind, the deed only complicated things, and she was about to dig even deeper, uncovering a boundary dispute that would throw gasoline on the fire. For the next week, Willow Lane felt like a stage split down the middle. On one side stood Patricia Kincaid, redoubling her efforts to hold on to her authority. On the other was Selina Ward, quietly going about her life, refusing to be intimidated. The neighborhood was caught in between, forced to choose sides. It started with whispers. At the corner house, a couple named Jeff and Marlene Trask muttered about how Patricia had finally gone too far this time. 2 doors down, an older resident, Howard Briggs, defended her, telling anyone who'd listen that Patricia's the only reason this street hasn't gone downhill. Every trip to the mailbox, every walk with the dog, became a chance for neighbors to stake out an opinion. Selina noticed the divide almost immediately. People she had never met before approached her with cautious kindness. A young mother, Denise Howell, stopped her one morning as she watered the flower pots on her porch. "I just want you to know," Denise said softly, glancing around as if worried someone might hear. "Not everyone here thinks the way Patricia does. Some of us are glad you bought the place. It looks better than it has in years." Selina smiled. "I appreciate that. I didn't move here to fight with anyone." Denise nodded quickly. "I believe you, but Patricia, she doesn't let go easy." Selina's expression hardened slightly. "I'm starting to see that." Meanwhile, Patricia was busy reinforcing her camp. She held impromptu sidewalk meetings outside her house, clipboards and papers spread across a folding table like evidence in a trial. She ranted about community standards and property values, her voice carrying down the street so no one could miss it. "She's reckless," Patricia barked to Howard Briggs one evening. "No respect for process, no respect for the HOA. If she stays unchecked, who knows what comes next? Loud parties, trash on the curb, God knows what else." Howard nodded along dutifully, though his wife, sitting nearby, kept her lips pressed together and avoided eye contact. The cracks in Patricia's support system were beginning to show. It wasn't just talk. Some neighbors began to act differently around Patricia. The older kids who once waved to her on their way home from school now crossed the street instead. Longtime residents who used to greet her cheerfully now offered only curt nods. Patricia told herself it was temporary, but deep down, she felt the shift. Selina, too, sensed the tension building. She had always prided herself on keeping her composure, but living under constant scrutiny was exhausting. One afternoon, as she carried groceries inside, she caught Howard's wife, Eleanor, lingering at the curb. "Can I help you?" Selina asked, balancing a paper bag against her hip. Eleanor hesitated, then leaned closer. "Just be patient. People are watching. They'll see the truth for themselves." Selina gave a faint smile. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Inside her house, Selina replayed those words. People are watching. She knew it was true. Every action she took, every response she gave Patricia was being measured by a neighborhood still deciding who to believe. Patricia, however, thrived on being underestimated. One evening, she stormed into her own kitchen and slammed her clipboard onto the counter. Her husband, Richard, looked up from his newspaper. "What now?" he sighed. "She thinks she's won," Patricia snapped, waving that deed around like it's the final word. But it's not. "I've been looking at the property lines, and I'm telling you, something doesn't add up." Richard frowned. "Property lines?" "Yes, the survey reports. I'm going to request a review. If there's even an inch of overlap onto my yard, I'll take her to court." Richard shook his head. "Patricia, maybe let this go." "Let this go?" she interrupted, her voice sharp. "This is my reputation, my neighborhood. If I back down now, everyone will think I was wrong." Richard muttered under his breath, but she ignored him. Her mind was already racing ahead, plotting her next move. Back across the street, Selina sat on her porch at sunset, watching children ride bikes up and down the pavement. She thought of the people who had whispered their support, of the neighbors who had remained silent. The divide was real, but she wasn't going to let Patricia's obsession define her new home. She reached for her phone, dialing a number she had saved the day she closed on the house, her real estate attorney in downtown Columbus. "Hi, it's Selina Ward," she said when the call connected. "I think I might need your advice on a situation that's getting out of hand." But Patricia's suspicion about the property lines wasn't just noise, it was about to ignite the conflict in a way neither she nor The following week, Patricia Kincaid marched into the Franklin County Clerk's office with the confidence of someone who believed the universe bent to her will. She requested copies of the most recent property surveys for Willow Lane, her manicured nails tapping impatiently on the counter. When the clerk handed her a thick packet of maps and stamped documents, Patricia flipped through them quickly, eyes narrowing. And then she saw it. A red boundary line had shifted. According to the updated survey, her beloved backyard, the one where she hosted HOA barbecues, the one with the garden she bragged about endlessly, slipped across the property line. By less than 6 feet, part of her yard now belonged to Selina Ward. Patricia's heart pounded, but not with panic. No, this discovery thrilled her. She saw it as leverage, a weapon she could wield. She snapped the folder shut, muttering, "Well, isn't that interesting?" Back on Willow Lane that evening, Patricia wasted no time. She stormed across the street, papers in hand, her face lit with the kind of false confidence that had fooled neighbors for years. Selina was in the backyard, pulling weeds from a flower bed, when Patricia appeared like a storm cloud at the fence line. "Care to explain this?" Patricia demanded, waving the packet of surveys. Selina rose slowly, dusting soil from her hands. "Explain what?" "This." Patricia slapped the papers against the wooden fence. "According to these records, part of this yard isn't yours. It's mine. That means your fence is illegal, and your so-called deed isn't as airtight as you thought." Selina reached for the documents, calmly flipping through them. Her eyes moved over the highlighted sections before she nodded. "Yes, I know about the survey adjustment. My realtor mentioned it during closing." Patricia's mouth fell open. "You knew?" "Of course I knew," Selina replied evenly. "That's why the deed includes the corrected boundary lines. Which means that strip of land you're pointing at, it belongs to me." The neighbors who had gathered nearby gasped. Patricia's face drained of color, but she quickly recovered, her voice rising to mask her panic. "That's absurd. I've maintained this yard for years. Everyone knows this space is mine. You can't just claim it." Selina folded the papers neatly and handed them back. "I didn't claim it. The county survey did, and the seller disclosed it before the sale. If you have an issue, you'll need to take it up with them, not me." Patricia's composure cracked. "You think you can take part of my property and parade it around like some trophy?" Selina took a step closer, lowering her voice but keeping her tone firm. "No, Patricia. I think you can't handle the fact that you built your kingdom on ground that doesn't belong to you." The crowd of neighbors grew thicker. Some leaned against fences, others stood at the edge of driveways, pretending to check their mail. Everyone knew they were watching something bigger than a property line dispute. This was a reckoning. Howard Briggs spoke up, surprising everyone. "She's right, Patricia. If the county survey says it belongs to her, it belongs to her. That's the law." Patricia spun toward him, eyes blazing. "You're siding with her?" Howard raised his hands defensively. "I'm siding with facts." Selina didn't gloat, though she could have. Instead, she clasped her hands together and said clearly, "I don't want your yard, Patricia. I don't want a fight. But I won't be bullied out of what legally belongs to me. Not today. Not ever." Patricia's jaw tightened. She wanted to scream, to accuse, to drag Selina down with her. But she felt the weight of the crowd pressing in, silently judging. For the first time, she realized she wasn't winning this battle. Selina turned back to her flower bed, her movements calm, deliberate. The statement was clear. She was done arguing. Patricia stood frozen for a moment, clutching the packet of surveys like a lifeline. Finally, she spun on her heel and stormed back toward her house, but her steps faltered slightly. She could feel the whispers starting even before she shut her front door. Inside, she collapsed into a chair, trembling with rage. Richard looked up from his seat at the kitchen table, sighing. "What happened now?" Patricia slammed the packet down. "She owns it. She actually owns part of my yard." Richard rubbed his temples. "Maybe it's time to let this go." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Never. If she thinks this ends here, she's wrong. I'll call a meeting. I'll remind everyone who really runs this neighborhood." But Patricia's emergency meeting wouldn't go the way she planned, because this time, the neighbors she thought she controlled were ready to speak up. The following Saturday evening, Patricia Kincaid called an emergency HOA meeting. She printed flyers, stuffed mailboxes, and even knocked on a few doors to ensure a turnout. Mandatory attendance, the flyer read in bold letters, though everyone knew the HOA couldn't legally require such a thing. Still, curiosity ran high, and by 7 o'clock, a good portion of Willow Lane was packed into the community centre on Main Street. The room smelled faintly of coffee and folding chairs, and the air buzzed with that strange tension only small-town politics could produce. Neighbours shuffled in, whispering in pairs, exchanging cautious glances. Selina Ward entered quietly, taking a seat near the middle. She felt the stares but didn't flinch. She was here to listen. Patricia stood at the front like a general before battle, her clipboard resting on the podium. She wore her sharpest blazer, her hair styled to perfection, as though appearance alone could reinforce her crumbling authority. She cleared her throat, silencing the room. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began. "As many of you know, there's been a situation concerning property standards and compliance here on Willow Lane. I've called this meeting because it is vital we address the threat to our community's order." Murmurs rippled through the room. Patricia pressed on. "Since day one, I have worked tirelessly to protect your property values, to keep this neighborhood desirable, safe, and respectable. But now we face someone who refuses to follow the rules, someone who undermines the structure that keeps this place strong." She cast her gaze toward Selina, who remained calm, hands folded in her lap. Patricia raised her voice. "This individual has ignored violation notices, disrespected leadership, and challenged the integrity of our association. And now she's claiming ownership of land that has been part of my home for decades." Gasps echoed, but so did skeptical chuckles. Patricia's words didn't land as smoothly as they once might have. Selina stood slowly, her chair scraping softly against the linoleum. "May I respond?" she asked, her tone measured. Patricia huffed. "Briefly." Selina stepped forward, her presence steady but commanding. "First, let's be clear. I am not a tenant. I purchased my home outright. The deed is in my name, filed with Franklin County. The so-called violation notices taped to my door were baseless. Second, as for the land dispute, yes, the survey changed. Yes, part of Patricia's backyard is now mine. That wasn't my doing. That was the county's correction. I have no intention of tearing down fences or making this ugly, but I will not be treated like I don't belong here." Her voice resonated, calm but powerful. A few neighbors clapped quietly before stopping, glancing around to gauge reactions. Patricia's lips tightened, furious that applause had entered the room. Howard Briggs, who had once been Patricia's staunch supporter, stood up. "Patricia, with all due respect, Selina's right. I looked at those surveys myself. The county made the adjustment. It's not up for debate. And frankly, this whole situation feels personal." A heavy silence fell. Patricia's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Personal?" she spat. "Yes," Howard said firmly. "From the minute Selina arrived, you assumed the worst. You went after her with notices, threats, and gossip. That's not leadership. That's harassment." A low rumble of agreement passed through the crowd. Patricia's composure faltered. She banged her hand against the podium. "I will not be disrespected in this way. I've given years of service to this neighborhood, and I won't let it crumble because one outsider refuses to play by the rules." Selina didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply said, "Respect isn't built on control. It's built on fairness." The words hit like a strike. Denise Howell, the young mother who had spoken to Selina privately, raised her hand. "I think it's time we talk about new leadership. We need someone who listens, not someone who dictates." More nods, more murmurs of agreement. Patricia's face burned. "You're suggesting a vote? Against me?" "Yes," Denise said simply. "That's how associations work." The room erupted, some people clapping, others whispering fiercely. Patricia slammed her clipboard down, her voice trembling. "Fine. If you want a vote, we'll have one. But don't come crying to me when this place falls apart without real leadership." Selina sat back down, her heart pounding. But she didn't smile. She wasn't here to humiliate Patricia. She was here to stand her ground, but Patricia had underestimated how far the neighborhood's patience. The HOA vote was set for the following Thursday evening, and the days leading up to it carried a strange charge through Willow Lane. Some neighbors avoided eye contact when passing Patricia on the street, while others openly whispered about how they planned to cast their ballots. For the first time in years, Patricia Kincaid felt her grip on the community slipping through her fingers. She doubled down on appearances. She trimmed her hedges to perfection, lined her porch with polished lanterns, and rehearsed speeches in front of the bathroom mirror. "Strong leadership is non-negotiable," she whispered to her reflection. "Without me, this neighborhood falls apart." But behind closed doors, the cracks were showing. Richard, her husband, grew tired of the nightly tirades. "Pat, you're making this worse," he muttered one evening as she stormed around the kitchen waving her clipboard. "You don't get it," Patricia snapped. "They're turning on me." After everything I've done for them, Richard leaned back in his chair. "Maybe because you treat them like subordinates instead of neighbors," her eyes flashed. "So you're against me too?" "I'm tired, Patricia. That's all," he said, folding his newspaper. "Maybe you should ask yourself why they're siding with Selena instead of blaming everyone else." Patricia turned away, jaw tight, unwilling to admit even the possibility. When Thursday arrived, the community center was packed tighter than it had been in years. Folding chairs filled every corner, with some residents standing along the walls. A large whiteboard at the front bore the words, "Vote of Confidence, HOA President." Patricia strode in first, clipboard under her arm like a shield. She wore her usual armor, sharp blazer, perfectly styled hair, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Selena entered a few minutes later, dressed simply in jeans and a soft sweater. She didn't seek the spotlight. She found a seat near the middle and nodded politely to those who greeted her. The meeting began with Patricia at the podium. "Neighbors," she said, her voice trembling slightly before regaining strength. "You know me. You know the years I've given to this community. Every holiday decoration, every safety patrol, every fine I've enforced. It was all to keep Willow Lane the kind of place people dream of living in." A few claps rang out, but they were scattered. Patricia pressed on. "Recently, one resident has made it her mission to challenge that order. She's accused me of bias, of harassment, even of fabricating rules. None of that is true. I am not the villain here. I am the reason this neighborhood is what it is." She stepped back, chest heaving, and gestured toward the floor. "If anyone has something to say, now is the time." Selena rose slowly, her calm presence drawing every eye. She walked to the front, her hands clasped together. "I didn't come here to run for president," she began. "I came here because I wanted a home. I wanted to unpack my boxes and build a life. But instead of a welcome, I was met with suspicion, threats, and accusations. Not from all of you, many of you have been kind, but from one person who thought control mattered more than community." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The room was silent, listening intently. "I don't want Patricia's position. I don't want her yard. I don't want power. What I do want is respect. The same respect each of you deserve when you pull into your driveway at the end of the day. If we can't have that, then what's the point of any association?" The room broke into applause. Not hesitant, not scattered, full resounding applause. Patricia's face stiffened as color drained from her cheeks. She looked around, desperate for allies, but even her usual supporters avoided her gaze. Denise Howell stood and spoke clearly. "I motion for a vote." Within minutes, slips of paper were distributed. Neighbors scribbled their choices, folded the ballots, and dropped them into a cardboard box at the front. The air felt electric as the votes were counted by 2 volunteers. Finally, the results were announced. Confidence in current HOA president, 9. No confidence, 27. Gasps, then murmurs, then another round of applause. Patricia's grip on the podium tightened, her knuckles white. This is a mistake," she stammered. "You'll regret this when everything falls apart." But the room wasn't listening. The crowd had already turned toward Selena, some offering handshakes, others pats on the shoulder. Patricia's words dissolved into the air, meaningless against the collective decision of her neighbors. Richard stepped forward quietly, placing a hand on her arm. "Come on, Pat," he said gently. "Let's go home." She shook him off, but her legs wobbled as she stepped down from. But even stripped of her title, Patricia wasn't ready to disappear quietly, and Selina's next challenge would prove that leadership wasn't about power, it was about character. The morning after the vote, Willow Lane felt different. It wasn't louder, it wasn't rowdier, but the air carried something new: relief. Neighbors waved to each other again. The long stares, the whispered gossip, the uncomfortable silence that had hung over the street for weeks. Those things loosened their grip. For the first time since she moved in, Selina Ward felt like she could breathe. She stepped onto her porch with her coffee and noticed Denise Howell walking by with her stroller. "Morning," Selina called. Denise grinned back. "Morning. You look lighter today." Selina chuckled softly. "Maybe because I didn't wake up to a notice taped to my door." Denise laughed, then lowered her voice. "You handled yourself with so much grace last night. Honestly, I don't think anyone else could have stood up to Patricia the way you did." Selina shook her head. "I wasn't trying to win anything. I just wanted her to stop. But maybe people needed to see that standing firm doesn't always mean fighting loud. Sometimes it just means refusing to bend." As Denise nodded, another neighbor, Jeff Trask, walked over from across the street. He extended his hand. "Selina, I owe you an apology. At first, I believed Patricia when she said you were a tenant. I didn't question it. But I see now she was wrong, and I was wrong for assuming." Selina accepted the handshake warmly. "Thank you, Jeff. That means a lot. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after behind them." Patricia's blinds twitched. She hadn't left her house since the vote. The once commanding woman was now a ghost on the block, watching from behind slats of plastic. Rumors swirled. Some said she was furious, others said she was embarrassed, but most agreed her reign was over. Later that afternoon, Selina's attorney stopped by with a folder of documents. "I just wanted to confirm," he said. "The deed and survey are ironclad. You don't have to worry about Patricia challenging them in court." "It wouldn't hold," Selina sighed in relief. "I figured as much, but it's good to hear it officially." "Keep these on file," the attorney said, handing her the papers. "Just in case she tries something. But honestly, I think she's burned too many bridges already." As he left, Selina spotted Howard Briggs tending to his yard. She walked over, her papers still in hand. "Howard, can I say something?" He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "Of course. Thank you for speaking up at the meeting. I know Patricia counted on you to back her up, and you didn't. That took courage." Howard gave a tired smile. "I should have spoken sooner. I've watched Patricia push people around for years. I thought keeping quiet kept the peace. Turns out it just gave her more power. You reminded me that silence isn't neutral. It's agreement." Selina nodded slowly. "I think we both learned something these past weeks." For the first time since moving in, she felt the neighborhood softening. Invitations trickled in. Denise offered to host her for dinner. Marlene Trask dropped off a pie. Even the kids on bikes waved without hesitation. Small gestures, but meaningful ones. Yet Selina didn't take joy in Patricia's downfall. That evening, she looked across the street at the darkened Kincaid home and felt a pang of empathy. Power had been Patricia's identity for so long that losing it must have felt like losing herself. Richard Kincaid crossed the lawn slowly and stopped at Selina's gate. "She's not herself right now," he said quietly. Selina folded her arms, her tone gentle. "I can imagine. This wasn't easy on her." Richard sighed. "You're a bigger person than she deserves, but thank you for not humiliating her when you had every right to." Selina offered a small smile. "We all stumble, some louder than others, but sometimes losing control is the only way people learn what control is really worth." Richard nodded, gratitude flickering in his tired eyes before he turned back to his house. That night, Selina sat on her porch as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, her yard lit with fireflies. She thought about the journey, the notices, the public confrontations, the vote. What started as harassment had turned into something bigger, a reminder that assumptions can poison a community, but truth has a way of clearing the air. But Patricia wasn't completely gone from the story yet. There was one last moment coming, one that would test whether Selena's grace could outlast Patricia's pride. It was nearly 2 weeks after the vote when Patricia Kincaid finally emerged from her self-imposed exile. The morning sun stretched across Willow Lane, catching neighbors off guard as her front door opened. She stepped out slowly, without her blazer, without her clipboard, looking older than she had just days before. Gone was the air of command she carried like a crown. What remained was someone stripped bare. Selena Ward was trimming hedges in her front yard when she noticed Patricia crossing the street. The sight made her pause. She set down her clippers, watching carefully as Patricia approached, hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Selena," Patricia began, her voice quieter than anyone had ever heard it. "I need to speak with you." Selena straightened, wiping her palms against her jeans. "All right," the neighbors noticed almost immediately. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open. By now, Willow Lane had learned that whenever Patricia and Selena stood face to face, something worth seeing was about to unfold. Patricia's eyes lingered on the ground before meeting Selena's. "I overstepped. I let my position get the better of me. I thought being president meant control, but all I did was push people away. I'm sorry for how I treated you." The words hung in the air like a fragile glass that could shatter at any second. The crowd holding its breath knew how difficult it must have been for Patricia to say them. Selena didn't rush her response. She studied Patricia, measuring not just the words but the sincerity behind them. Finally she said, "Apology accepted. But it's not me you need to fix things with. It's this neighborhood." Patricia glanced over her shoulder at the faces peeking from porches and windows. She gave a small nod, her lips pressed thin. "I'll try." For the first time, Selena saw not the tyrant of the HOA, but a woman wrestling with the weight of her own pride. She softened. "Patricia, leadership isn't about proving you're right. It's about listening. About protecting people, not policing them." Patricia swallowed hard. "I forgot that." Richard stepped out of their house, leaning on the railing as though relieved his wife had finally said the words. The neighbors who had gathered outside relaxed visibly. Some smiled, others whispered to one another. The storm that had held them all hostage was finally passing. Selena picked up her clippers again and smiled faintly. "This street doesn't need a president. It needs neighbors." That's all. Patricia gave a stiff nod and turned back toward her home. She wasn't instantly redeemed, but the first step had been taken. Later that evening, the atmosphere on Willow Lane felt lighter than it had in months. Kids played tag until the streetlights flickered on, couples strolled hand in hand, and the sound of laughter drifted from porch to porch. For once there was no one hovering with clipboards or violation slips, just families living side by side. Selena sat on her porch, sipping iced tea as Denise Howell joined her. "You know," Denise said with a smile, "you didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for all of us. For years, Patricia's word was law, and nobody questioned it. You showed us that it's okay to push back." Selena chuckled softly. "I didn't move here planning to be a teacher. I just wanted peace. But maybe sometimes peace has to be earned." Denise nodded. "Well, you earned it. And you changed this neighborhood for the better." Selena leaned back in her chair, watching the children laugh under the glow of the streetlights. For the first time since her moving truck pulled up, she felt at home. Not because the deed said so, but because the people around her finally saw her as she truly was. An equal, a neighbor, a part of their community. The lesson wasn't lost on anyone who had watched the saga play out. Assumptions destroy trust, pride blinds judgment, and respect is the foundation that keeps a community strong. Selena smiled to herself, whispering quietly, "Ownership isn't about fences or property lines. It's about how you treat the people beside you." And with that, she raised her glass of tea, clinking it lightly against Denise's water bottle. This story reminds us all, true power isn't control, it's respect. Don't let pride or prejudice write your story. If you enjoyed this lesson and want more stories that reveal the heart of human character, make sure to subscribe.